The grand estate loomed at the top of the hill, a sprawling symbol of wealth and status. Its manicured lawns stretched endlessly, adorned with hedges trimmed so perfectly they looked like art. Grace Harper stood at the gates, her breath hitching as she adjusted the strap of her worn leather bag. Her heart pounded with nerves, but she steadied herself. This job was her lifeline, her chance to finally give her son the life he deserved. At 28, Grace had weathered more storms than most people twice her age. Her life in the city had been a relentless grind, working long shifts as a waitress, barely making enough to cover rent and groceries. The bills piled up faster than she could pay them, and despite her sacrifices, she often went to bed with the weight of failure pressing down on her. But today marked a fresh start. A prestigious housekeeping position for one of the wealthiest families in the state wasn't just rare, it was a miracle. The iron gates creaked open, and a uniformed guard gestured for her to enter. "Mr. Bennett is waiting for you in the main house," he informed her politely. Grace nodded, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you." The gravel crunched under her worn shoes as she walked up the winding driveway. Butterflies fluttered in her stomach as she took in the elegant architecture. The gleaming white columns, tall arched windows, and balconies adorned with ivy. When she reached the front entrance, a butler opened the door with practiced precision. "Ms. Harper, please follow me," he said, leading her through a marble-floored foyer. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, casting fractured rainbows across the walls. Seated in the sunlit parlor was Nicholas Bennett, the man whose name graced countless business magazines. Tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, he exuded power and authority. Yet there was a warmth in his hazel eyes that caught Grace off guard. "Ms. Harper," he greeted, standing to shake her hand. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Grace returned the handshake, her palm clammy. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Bennett. I'm grateful for the chance." He gestured for her to sit. "I reviewed your references. You come highly recommended, despite your recent employment gaps. I admire your resilience." Grace stiffened slightly. She had hoped the gaps wouldn't be a focus, but they were inevitable. Years spent navigating custody battles and hospital stays for her son, Liam. "I've faced challenges, but I'm ready to work hard." Nicholas nodded thoughtfully. "This position isn't just about cleaning. My children need stability, structure, and care. It's been difficult since their mother passed." "I'm so sorry for your loss," Grace said softly. "Thank you." His voice faltered briefly before regaining composure. "The children, Elena and Max, are 7 and 5. They're spirited but good kids. I need someone patient and dependable." "I understand," Grace assured him. "I have experience with children." His gaze sharpened. "You mentioned a son in your application." "Yes," she said, her heart constricting. "Liam. He's 8. Nicholas leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Family is important, Ms. Harper. If you can give my children the care and attention they need, you'll find this job rewarding." "I won't let you down," she promised. After a few more formalities, the interview concluded. Nicholas stood, offering her a firm nod. "Welcome aboard. The guest house will be your living quarters. I'll have someone show you the way." Grace's throat tightened with relief. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett." As she followed the butler toward the guest house, she felt a glimmer of hope she hadn't experienced in years. Maybe this job was the fresh start she and Liam desperately needed. But as she settled into her new role, Grace couldn't shake the nagging fear that her past would catch up to her. There was a reason she had kept parts of her life hidden, secrets buried deep, painful, and unresolved. Secrets that Nicholas Bennett could never know, because if he did, it might destroy everything she was trying to build. The days at the Bennett estate were a whirlwind of schedules, routines, and unexpected moments of joy. Grace quickly found herself immersed in the household's rhythm, waking early to prepare breakfast, managing the children's activities, and maintaining the sprawling mansion alongside a small team of staff. Elena and Max were delightful, but spirited. 7-year-old Elena carried herself with an air of quiet curiosity, always reading books far too advanced for her age. Max, on the other hand, was a burst of chaotic energy, endlessly curious, and prone to harmless mischief. Grace, with her natural warmth, found herself winning their trust faster than she'd expected. One morning, as she braided Elena's hair before school, the little girl looked up through the mirror. "Are you going to leave like all the others?" Elena asked suddenly, her voice small but resolute. Grace's hands stilled for a moment before she continued braiding. "What makes you think I'd leave, sweetheart?" "Everyone does," Elena said softly. "They always say they won't. But then, Daddy gets too busy, and they just go away." Grace's heart ached at the loneliness hidden beneath the child's words. "I'm not going anywhere, Elena," she promised gently. "I'm here for you and Max." Elena's lips curved into a tentative smile. "Good." That conversation stuck with Grace throughout the day. She knew the pain of abandonment all too well, the ache of being let down by people you depended on. It was why she had built walls around her own heart. Later that evening, as Grace finished tidying the kitchen, Nicholas Bennett walked in. His tie loosened and weariness etched into his features. "You've done wonders with the kids," he said, leaning against the counter. "It's only been 2 weeks, but I see the difference already." Grace smiled modestly. "They're great kids. They just need someone to listen." Nicholas nodded thoughtfully. "It's been hard since their mother passed." The air grew thick with unspoken grief. Grace had read about Isabella Bennett's tragic death in the news, killed in a car accident 2 years ago. The tabloids had painted Nicholas as a broken man, burying himself in work to cope with the loss. "I can't imagine what that's been like for you," Grace said softly. "Some days are easier than others," he admitted, "but guilt never really leaves you." Grace hesitated before speaking. "You're doing your best, and that's enough." Nicholas's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the distance between employer and employee seemed to blur. Before either could say more, the sound of giggles echoed down the hallway. Max came racing into the kitchen, holding a toy airplane high above his head. "Ms. Grace, watch this," he exclaimed, launching the plane into a clumsy loop that crashed onto the floor. Nicholas laughed, the tension lifting from his face. "Nice try, buddy," he said, ruffling Max's hair. As Max retrieved his toy and ran back to the playroom, Nicholas turned back to Grace. "You really are good with them," he said. "It's like you were meant to be here." Grace's smile faltered for the briefest second. If only he knew the truth, the part of her life she had kept hidden. That night, as she tucked Liam into bed in their cozy guest house, her son looked up at her with sleepy eyes. "Do you like it here, Mom?" he asked. "I do," she said softly, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "Do you?" Liam nodded. "Yeah, it's like a castle." Grace chuckled. It is pretty fancy, isn't it? Liam's expression grew serious. Do they know? Her breath caught. Know what? About Dad. Grace's throat tightened. No, sweetheart, and they don't need to. Liam nodded, his trust in her unwavering. But as he drifted off to sleep, Grace sat by his bedside, consumed by the weight of the truth she had been hiding. Years ago, her husband had made choices that shattered their lives, choices that left them with nothing but debt, fear, and a reputation tarnished beyond repair. Grace had fought tooth and nail to rebuild their lives, but the scars remained. If Nicholas Bennett ever discovered who Liam's father was, everything she had worked for could come crashing down. But secrets had a way of surfacing when least expected. And Grace knew it was only a matter of time before her past caught up with her. The summer sun cast a golden glow over the sprawling Bennett estate as the children played on the front lawn. Their laughter filled the air, blending seamlessly with the rustle of leaves and the chirping of birds. Grace stood by the kitchen window, watching Elena and Max chase Liam across the grass. She smiled despite the nervous weight pressing on her chest. Things had been peaceful, almost perfect, but perfection was fragile, and secrets always had a way of finding daylight. Her thoughts were interrupted by the low hum of Nicholas's voice from the living room. He was on the phone, his tone sharp and commanding. Yes, I need a background check report. Full details. I don't care how long it takes. Grace's stomach twisted. She knew who he was talking about. The past week had been tense after an anonymous letter arrived at the Bennett household, warning Nicholas about hiring someone with a criminal connection. No names were mentioned, but Grace knew the truth was edging closer to exposure. She took a shaky breath. It's time, she told herself. No more running, no more hiding. A few moments later, Nicholas ended his call and noticed her standing near the doorway. Grace, he said, his voice steady but laced with suspicion. We need to talk. Of course, she said, wiping her palms on her apron. They sat across from each other in the elegant dining room. The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken words. I received some disturbing information, Nicholas began carefully. Someone claimed you have ties to questionable activities. Grace's heart raced, but she met his gaze head on. It's true, she admitted quietly. Nicholas blinked, clearly not expecting her honesty. What do you mean? My husband, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. He was involved in a major financial scandal, a Ponzi scheme that destroyed countless lives. People lost everything because of him. Nicholas leaned back in shock. Your husband was Marcus Harper? Yes, she whispered. When he was arrested, Liam and I were left with nothing but shame and debt. I had no part in his crimes, but that didn't matter to the world. People saw me as guilty by association. Nicholas's expression hardened, and for a moment, Grace feared she had lost everything. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed this job, she said desperately. I wanted a chance to give Liam a stable life, free from his father's shadow. I didn't want your judgment before you knew who I really am. Nicholas was silent, processing her words. The weight of the revelation hung heavily between them. Finally he spoke, his voice softer. I know what it's like to carry guilt that isn't yours. Grace looked up, surprised. When Isabella died, he continued, it was because I insisted she take that business trip. She wanted to stay home with the kids, but I convinced her it was important. I blamed myself for years. Still do, sometimes. Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Nicholas." He nodded, composing himself. "You've been good for my family, Grace. My kids adore you. And more importantly, I trust you." Her breath hitched. "Does this mean—" "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly. "Your past doesn't define you, and I won't let anyone use it against you." Relief washed over Grace like a tidal wave. "Thank you," she whispered. Nicholas stood, offering her a small, genuine smile. "Now, let's get back to what matters. Taking care of these kids." As they walked back to the lawn, Grace felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The truth was out, and instead of tearing her world apart, it had forged an unexpected bond of understanding and redemption. Later that evening, as she tucked Liam into bed, he whispered, "Mom, are we gonna stay here forever?" Grace kissed his forehead. "Maybe not forever," she said with a smile, "but for a long, long time." If you enjoyed this story of love, redemption, and second chances, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stories of Brilliance for more heartwarming tales that touch your soul. Stay tuned for more incredible journeys that will inspire, surprise, and move you